comes to the TV show Obituary, I'm going to be completely honest and say I actually found it to be a very intriguing show for a whole lot of reasons. Firstly, I just love the characters. They're all very comedic and riveting in their own way, especially when it comes to the protagonist, who's not only very funny, but very morbid at the same time. Now, the plot of this show is fantastic to watch, as in the very first episode it changed my perception on what this show is actually going to be about, which you rarely get with some TV shows because they somewhat have to lay out what the plot of the show is, and in this one it changes so quickly that it left me like, oh, okay. I was quite shocked. I think that was just really great writing. Now, the subplot of the show, whilst I would say was slightly predictable, was still fascinating to me, as in the first few episodes they give glimpses of here and there of what actually happened, but then it's in the last three they really show what is going on, and they're diving more into it, just really hooking me in as a fan. When it comes to the humour of this show, I would say there's multiple styles. Firstly, you have the morbid humour which comes from Elvira, whether it be from her morbid narrations or just her in general. I really enjoyed that, it was very funny. We also get the Irish banter which is scattered across this show, which is really enjoyable to watch. And then lastly, you just get silly moments of humour, which I really did enjoy. The violence in this show, whilst not the most violent, like bloody or graphic, it's definitely something that shocks you as a fan, as you're not really expecting it half the time. When it comes to the tone of the show, I will say that hooks me as well, because it is very dark, and especially as the show progresses, me as a fan, I found it very difficult to somewhat support the protagonist, that being Elvira, as she makes these decisions which it somewhat crosses the line between anti-hero and villain, and this is something that we see quite a lot throughout the show, and it just shows how great the writing is, that it somewhat separates the audience, or at least for me, on being on her side and thinking she's going too far. That's what I love. Now, throughout this show, I noticed a lot of themes when it came to guilt and trauma. We see this theme go through a lot of characters. The most notorious one you notice is through Elvira's dad. We see he has this guilty secret, and because of how dark it is, we see he is continuously drinking. We don't know exactly what the secret is to the very last episode, and we somewhat understand why he is drinking so excessively. Next, we have Elvira's boss, who has a secret of his own, and that is he was hiding the fact he was in a relationship with a deceased writer. And then lastly, we see the theme of trauma through the characters of Elvira and her friend Mallory, who they somewhat have a bond, as both their mothers were lost very early on in their childhood. That's they've got a traumatic bond together because of that. Now, when it comes to the last episode of the show, I will be honest and say I found it to be very good, as we are seeing them, as we see the subplot finally being tied up and every single loose end being fixed, even having a nice little ending for Elvira's friend Mallory, seeing she somewhat getting a nice ending out of everyone in this town. And then we have this intriguing little surprise in the last 10 minutes of the show, and then somewhat having this chilling ending to wrap up this particular season. Now, when it comes to critiques, I have to be honest and say I have none to say. Now, I could mention how I felt the show went a bit too dark with Elvira's character, but there are elements and where they add some heartfelt emotional scenes with Elvira that somewhat balances that out, and so I really have no critiques to say. Overall, I really did enjoy the characters of this show. I really got hooked on the plot. I really enjoyed the subplot. I really enjoyed the humour and the dark atmosphere that came with it. Really enjoyed this show. So is it good? I'm going to be completely honest and say I think it is really good, possibly even great. Racing wise, it's an 8 out of 10. Now, when it comes to would I rewatch it, the answer is maybe. Like I said, I really enjoyed it, but there's nothing big that's making me want to go back and rewatch this. But that's not to say I don't want to see any more. I really hope this show gets picked up for a second season, as I was really hooked into the characters and the world they created. When it comes to recommendations, I'm going to say them, but at the same time not explain too much, because it could reveal spoilers about this show. I really wouldn't want to ruin this show for anyone. The first show is the TV show Dexter. I recommend it not only because of the morbid narration that we get with Elvira, her fascination over death and her somewhat sarcastic, morbid quips, but also because of the somewhat relationship she has with Mallory slightly reminds me of the relationship Deb and Dexter had. Next is the TV show Afterlife, as because we see the way Elvira interviews the deceased's family, it reminded me of when Ricky Gervais would interview these somewhat local residents trying to create up a story. Obviously completely different results, one's more comedic, one's somewhat darker and is building up upon a particular character. They both had great results. And then lastly, I recommend the TV show Wednesday, not only because of great female lead characters, but also because they both have that morbid, dark humour, which I really got a kick out of on this show. Those are my recommendations. This has been my review for the TV show Obituary. Thank you for watching. If you have enjoyed, please like and subscribe, but most importantly, thank you and have a nice day.